We're Nick Lombardino and Zach Blumenfeld, co-founders of CultureCon. Welcome to a special series on the CultureCon podcast, Culture Starts Here.
This content series is brought to you in partnership with our friends at ADVISA, a Midwest-based consultancy helping CEOs, HR leaders, and managers transform workplace culture.
In each episode, ADVISA CEO Heather Haas and leadership consultant BJ McKay dive into practical ways to initiate and sustain the culture you need to drive growth and success at your organization.
The Culture Starts Here series starts now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special live edition of the podcast episode of the Culture Starts Here series with ADVISA, part of the CultureCon podcast. We have got an incredible episode for you today. And before we go there with the topic, let's introduce the familiar voices on this show, Heather Haas and BJ McKay. Welcome to your own show, Heather and BJ.
Thank you. This is great to have you guiding us and leading the way for us, Jason.
You've previously done 8 stellar episodes in this series that have really led up to this really big topic we're covering today, which is to lead as human. And I tell you, it feels like with everything that has shifted in terms of a lot of rollouts with AI models and how it's being used in business, this concept of to lead as human feels very timely to be discussing today. So let's kick off with that. Heather, let's start with you. To lead as human, that's really big. What does that mean to you right now?
Well, I mean, as you teed it up, there's so much chatter out there about AI. There's so much that we're all sick of it, of hearing about it and wondering about it. And even some of us are even tired from trying to use it. I think for us at ADVISA, because our roots and everything we do is focused on helping leaders be more effective, we've been really contemplating the question, what is uniquely human that AI cannot replace about leadership? So the title of this podcast is our point of view, if you will, that leadership cannot be wholly usurped by technology. There's still an element of human beings interacting with other human beings in a way that builds connection and creates relationship. And we don't think that's ever going to go away, even as leaders are using AI, even as technology continues to occupy greater space in the world and in our companies. It just raises the bar for how we have to show up with more humanity as leaders.
And BJ, how about you? What does it bring to mind for you, this topic?
In my mind, if you look back, like over the course of history, like millions of years of human history, what it is to be a leader, like this is ancient. This is in our like DNA as human beings. And so when you think about everything that's like uniquely human, think back on all of human history of like what leadership looked like and what brought us here. And I'd challenge anybody to even think about, and I do as well, what's the most impactful things in my life? What are the things that get me out of bed in the morning? What are the things that bring me the most joy when I look at my lowest moments or my proudest moments? And it's always with other people. It's not a trip that I took. It's not even like the challenging times. Yeah, that was it. But who was with me? It's a first and last name. It's these people. And that thing is going to persevere as long as there are human beings. So there is a place for us. There's a place for leadership. And I think that that's what we tend to tie into at ADVISA as we're working with leaders in terms of that level of self-awareness. Who are you and who are you to other people? That stays fully intact no matter what happens with AI.
Absolutely. With all the questions swirling around the connection piece, I think you're starting to see more people starting to have some reactions and maybe even a little pushback against AI that we haven't seen so far, to say like, we need to slow down. We need to be more thoughtful and careful in terms of how we're using this. We need to use our human judgment to understand these are the ways we're going to use it in business, not use it in business. In the conversations that you're having with business leaders right now, are they weighing some of those same challenges of trying to figure out what should we be doing? What should we be staying away from? Are we going too fast? Are they weighing some of these questions?
Yes, it's what could we be doing? What should we be doing? And I think what's overwhelmingly clear to to us who are trying to support leaders with all of our work with our clients is that there's a tremendous lack of clarity right now. I think you have individual leaders who are some who are extremely eager. They've been leaning in, using different large language models, doing all kinds of cool stuff. You have some leaders who are kind of on the fence, doing a little bit, a few productivity hacks here and there, but nothing too big. And you have some who are really afraid and they're just waiting for somebody to like lay it out. Here's what you should be doing. So I think the fact that people are seeking that clarity and organizations, they don't quite have it yet. The organizational readiness to put together a plan or give the guidance or even just define the tool set. What we're finding in a lot of our clients is organizationally, most small to mid-sized businesses are not there yet. So you have this interesting delta between individual leaders who are taking matters into their own hands or just not doing anything at all. You've got that space between that and then strategically, what does the organization need or want people to be doing with AI? So I don't know, BJ, what are you seeing? I mean, you're on the front lines of talking to prospects and working with clients directly.
I'd echo a lot of what you've shared, but I've also what I'm hearing from folks, what they're experiencing is the people that have been typically good in the organization, be it leaders or downchain to frontline leaders, that have been great at managing change, that have had broad perspective, that know how to use all kinds of tools and to manage disruption well in the past, tend to be thriving. They tend to be using this to really elevate work and make things easier. The people that were more sophomoric and were maybe not the best workers or just did not have the job competence or what have you. It's like the kid writing an essay question that they don't know the answer to. So they just keep writing it and they're outsourcing it to AI, and AI is not helping them. It's obvious that they don't know how to prompt. They don't know how to use the tool. They're trying to just, I need to do something here. They're kind of floundering. What you're seeing is kind of like if there's some form of a bell curve where the people that have always tend to lead well and to make great decisions on behalf of the business, that hasn't stopped. If anything, it's accelerated. But the distance between them and the rank and file is starting to grow seismically. Like, how do we bring them along? How do we replicate this? That's essentially the new challenge. And then they're into what Heather talked about. Systematically, as a business, where does this live? Where does this fit? How do we train people on how to do this so this doesn't keep happening, where we have 4 people out of 30 that are effective with this tool or doing something that's actually advancing the business?
With that in mind, BJ, are those leaders, are they trying to understand how do we support the ones who maybe are struggling with this? Or are they focused more on the ones that are getting this? How do we continue pouring gasoline on the fire and keep moving that direction? Do you get a sense of like where leaders are trying to focus if they're starting to notice this pattern?
The best way I can answer that is you have to understand that the clients that we work with are anywhere from like a 50 employee, second, third generation company upwards to a 1,000 employee Fortune 100 company. And, you have everything in between: software, finance, not-for-profit, government, all of these clients of our 450 plus that we work with at ADVISA, it ranges everywhere. So the ones that tend to be smaller under less resources, I'm already wearing too many hats. And this is kind of floating in the background. I'm still trying to do work like I normally do. And I'm trying to, almost like Heather shared before, like, yeah, you keep doing that. You keep doing that out there. That's helping you. That's great. The further we go up in the chain, that's where it's like the temperature starts to increase. They were feeling a pressure. We need to do something about this because people are doing things and we don't have any control over it. And they're carrying our business card with them. So there's a growing tension in terms of that.
It's really interesting you bring that up. There's a HBR, Harvard Business Review article that came out here pretty recently that was showing that the first signs of burnout really are coming from the people who embrace AI the most, and that it's not necessarily reducing work, but where we're at right now is it's intensifying work for a lot of people. And so, I sometimes wonder for those that are the high achievers that are, diving in head first and they're doing it. It seems like maybe many of them also are like, gosh, like I thought this was going to reduce maybe the amount of work. Maybe I'm putting in 4 or 5 hours a day instead of 8 to 10. And right now it seems like that's not necessarily the case, that maybe more is just coming their way. Heather, have you been hearing or experiencing anything with that where this conception of, oh, now that we're using AI, we're not going to be quite as busy, we're not going to be quite as burned out? It seems like maybe that's not the case yet.
No, in fact, in our experience, starting to add AI into the mix, it just raises the bar for what it takes to be effective as a leader. It doesn't lower the bar. The stakes are higher because once, initially it can feel intense because there's the cognitive load of trying to do your day job, the things that you've always done, but you've also got this learning curve. I'm trying to now do this analysis and put the right prompt into an LLM, and you're floundering around trying to figure out how to use the tools. So you've got that learning curve on top of what you're already trying to do, but then it's the and now that some tasks that are more rote or transactional, as some of those things start to come off of a leader's plate, that's kind of when the fear sets in, when it's like, oh gosh, now what's left is I actually have to lead my team, cast a vision, give tough feedback, because that's what can't be replaced. AI can't get in a room with you and your direct report to have the tough conversation for you. You can use it as a thinking partner. You can, prepare, but you still have to have the presence and the skills to navigate that. So I think some of that intensity, it's the learning, it's the now I'm sort of exposed as a leader for the human skills that I have or don't have, because it's easy to hide behind sort of the tasks. But true leadership, when you actually learn how to delegate and build your team, what you should be doing is rising above being the doer. And even as a people leader, eventually you rise above just leading teams and people and you become a culture leader. But in our experience, a lot of people stay stuck. They're still doing. And so throwing the AI into a very busy day on top of everything else, when you haven't had the judgment and the clarity of like, what stays in my jar, my leadership jar, and what do I need to take out now that AI is here and helping me in these ways, but also exposing that I have some real development gaps as a leader over in these areas.
I love that analogy of the jar. And my guess would be a lot of leaders are feeling like I'm getting a lot of stuff added into my jar. I'm not doing a good job of getting stuff out of my jar.
Exactly. That's where we are.
Yeah. And you brought up the human skills, and McKinsey put some stuff out there too that was really interesting. Their 25 analysis was saying that the skills that are growing the fastest that are needed for leaders this decade are communication, collaboration, and creativity. Not that they need to be better prompt engineers or any of those other things that you said. So, just supporting your point that it's stripping away a lot of things that may have been distractions or things that weren't really priorities for leaders, and really making them double down to use those skills or strengthen them if they were a little bit weaker.
100%. I mean, those three things that you mentioned, those are durable human skills. That's why I said at the top, technology is always going to come and go. I was just chatting with someone this morning in our company about how when he used to work at a former company, it was all about make sure as you're selling this software, you talk about it being in the cloud. This is cloud based. And nobody talks about the cloud anymore
I
because
know who
it's
you're talking to.
yeah, yes. Because it's not a thing. We're not that far away from people not even talking about AI anymore because it's in the water. It's in the air of everything we do. It's just part of it. So that's why what we teach in terms of change management and critical thinking and empathy and emotional intelligence and setting vision, that the things that leaders have to do to be effective, those are still the things. The exciting part that I don't think we're talking enough about, which is why we've really tried to lean into this space, is also AI can support leaders even doing the human things that much better. Creativity is never going to go away, but AI can maybe push your creativity to new heights. So that's just a small example.
The premium on being inefficient should be looked at for a real leader. Going out of their way to be inefficient, to make a trip to see somebody, to pause, to get with somebody and say, hey, let's just have this out for not an hour meeting, because that's what Outlook says a meeting should be, but really just being inefficient, like doing things outside of the technology to open space for that. And if you're a leader listening to this right now, how's that going? Because all of these are activity creators and we're getting stuff done. And it might be a thinking partner if you're even using it well. But that should lead into a long series of pauses that rarely get programmed in and are religiously protected in your calendar, in your day, week, or month. And I think there's more of a premium now of like, where am I showing up physically in time and space for people? Because it's expensive. And I have a CEO of a larger healthcare company that's geographically distributed. And one of the most impactful things that they've done in recent years is to be sending out their key leaders, the CFO, the COO, the C everything, out to these far-reaching places. And they're like, what should we do when we're out there? I'm like, just be there and do what you were going to do anyway. There's a premium on that because everyone's, I'm busy. And one other like fine point that kind of ties in what Heather was talking about as well is if you're a leader wrestling with this right now, I would have you look strongly at those feelings in your guts of anxiety, worry, doubt, imposter syndrome, all of those things, and don't fill it with activity to avoid it. Those are signals telling you something. And you need to rest with those. And people in general, especially in America, we don't have time to rest with those and think what those mean. We need to get stuff done. And that's where the leader has to be like, whoa, I need to just understand what's going on here because people are expecting things from me. And this culture is going to be measured out by my behavior and how I respond to not only this, but everything else.
That is so good, BJ. That the premium of inefficiency. I love that term. I think you should trademark that.
Yeah.
I love being inefficient. I could be a master.
I love it. I love it. But you touch on something that we're starting to see that is becoming really important in the marketplace. And it's this IRL that you're touching on in real life is so important. I don't think many of us in the future are going to want to go to AI concerts. Maybe we will. Who knows? But like, I know for me, like I want to go and I want to see the actual artist perform and go for the experience. And this concept of in real life is really important for leaders to be spending that time. And the other thing too is to remember the studies so far are showing us the more that we have AI do things for us, there is an atrophy of that skill. Anthropic itself, just this month, their February 2026 report showed typically it's about a 17% loss in how proficient you are with that skill if you lean into AI doing it for you. And so there's trade-offs that you have to consider too as a leader, don't you? Don't you have to, Heather?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I think I've read and seen it called, AI brain rot, that you can over rely on these things such that the synapses in your brain there used to be a nice little track woven in there for you to do, I don't know, summarizing a meeting into your own voice and bullet points to send to your team, which now AI does that for you. The cognitive processing that goes into reading a room and blending that in with whatever data, if you're not using your brain, you're losing some of the sensory inputs that can be so important to weave into whatever data and analysis that AI can be helping you with. So I think it's really critical. And then that's really, as we're locking arms with leaders in this time and space, trying to help them discern for themselves, what are your natural strengths? What's your superpower as a leader? And how do you make sure that when you put on the AI Iron Man suit, it's helping you do the things that get in the way of your superpower and that are creating friction for moving the work forward with your team? Let AI help you with that. And then don't lose the thing that made you great to begin with, because we've still got to stay sharp cognitively. That's really, and emotionally. There's something when BJ was talking about showing up and being present. The reason that's so important is because we're neurobiologically wired for connection. That's how we're made. And so the hormone oxytocin and dopamine and the endorphins that go off inside of us when we're at a concert versus just listening to Spotify, or when BJ and I are having a one-on-one over lunch versus just looking at each other in a little box on Zoom. That stuff is real. And that's why it's so critical that we don't lose that. That's the to lead is human part.
Heather, what you shared there reminded me of some research that Adam Grant summarized just in the last year around as human beings, do we develop, retain, and then apply information better if we take handwritten notes versus if we're just typing notes? It's better if you're writing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a former educator, so learning theory and how kids learn, there is a tactile kinesthetic part of learning. And for different people, it's more important than others. But for some people, the handwriting things, I'm kind of one of them. I love to take notes. Once I take notes and write it down, it's here. Other people, though, it's very auditory. They just need to hear it. Writing is a distraction or typing is a distraction. So that's what I mean about that self-awareness for leaders is so key. How do you best learn? And how do you make sure AI isn't stripping that away in the name of efficiency or productivity? There's unintended consequences.
Rolling back just a little bit about thinking on your own and doing things on your own. And if you evaluate your own life, when you grew the most, you were the most uncomfortable. You've experienced stress, maybe even frustration as you're trying to grasp a topic or you're trying to figure something out in a company meeting or you're doing an acquisition. It's just, it's hard and it's stressful. And it's like, I just want to avoid that. I always am more nervous when I'm working or coaching somebody when they're too comfortable, when they're just nodding their heads. Because the human body, it wants to not burn calories. It doesn't want to use energy. So your natural flow
Yep.
is going to be into that valley. So when you're thinking, oh, this is really going great, I'm like, are you leading a company or what are you doing here? Because if it's all great, there's probably some big blind spots emerging that you're going to miss there when those things happen. And then one other finer point at the organizational level, the ones that have dusty, unused, and unsupported mission, vision, values, and then leadership capabilities that roll up to those, they're going to struggle the most with this or any change. Because what are we even doing here? What are we trying to advance and how do we work? If you haven't defined any of those things, AI or any disruptive anything, including competitors, you are extremely exposed there. And that's something that only you can do if you're on that leadership team of an organization.
So what I just heard from that part is leaders, there's no shortcut to leadership, even though AI is here now. And even though you may be getting the dopamine hits of like, I'm using this every day, I'm plugging in questions, it's solving it for me. Eventually, there's going to be a cost to that, either in terms of potentially a mistake being made, an atrophy of skills that you need to be, to BJ's point, you need to be struggling with. You need to be struggling with that tension to actually develop and learn the skill yourself as a leader. It comes at a cost. And to both of your points, it really does feel like right now we're just kind of in this craze where you hop on LinkedIn. I don't know if your feed is like this, but my feed is about all these people. Look at all these wonderful things that I'm doing with AI. And I think it creates for a lot of us, if that's your feed, of like, I got to keep up. We got to go faster. I got to do more. And slowing down and understanding this is not a sprint that you're trying to win a 100-meter dash. Like this is a marathon. This is, you want to understand trade-offs. You want to understand it at a very deep cognitive level in terms of what does this mean for learning and development in our organization? What does it mean in terms of how we're having feedback conversations? Like you said, it has real impacts, but it feels like right now it's really easy to get caught up in the keeping up with the Joneses with this. And for leaders to be like, I feel like we're falling behind. We got to go. We got to adopt more. We got to adopt faster. And what I'm hearing both of you say is sometimes you need to slow down. You need to ask some really big, important questions before you're jumping in.
Yeah. There's a Bo Dean song. I think the title is Go Slow Down. That, sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. So, in that part of the slowing down that I'm pretty passionate about is organizations need to remember that the entire world has, changed on its axis with AI sweeping in to how we work and the world economy and all of that. And as the world changes, as the workplace shifts dramatically, we overlook that we aren't helping leaders retool, reskill, and giving them a beat to catch up, like you said, so that they're not feeling behind or overwhelmed or uncertain. And that's why I think this is such an opportune time for organizations to really pause and say, what is the implication for our business of AI coming in? And what does that mean for our leaders? And clarifying what does it mean for our leaders is so huge, because your leaders are the bellwether for the culture of the organization. What they celebrate, what they tolerate, what they are talking to their team members about, that becomes the culture of the organization. So if we can give them some development and give them an opportunity to learn new skills, but also create that vision and that game plan for how specifically is AI impacting our company, our customers, and our go to market. Now you've got leaders who can confidently bring their people through the implementation dip of change. But what I see is companies are rushing to do cool things with AI and they're leaving leaders in the dust. And I think leaders deserve better than that. I think they are our best hope for helping organizations stay competitive and retain great people in the midst of all this tumult and transformation.
You brought up values there, Heather. I think it's great to point back to those because I just have to wonder if the organizations that are moving through this very quickly to stand things up and deploy and embed it throughout not only the way they operate as a business, but how they're working with their clients and partners. Have you taken time to understand where it may bump up against your values, the tension that that's going to create in certain moments? And when that happens, how are you going to respond? It just feels like we're going so quickly. And I think we have to temper that with good judgment and wisdom and discernment to slow down and say, just because it feels like all around us, there's a mad rush to go, 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 go. You put it beautifully, Heather. You've got to slow down to go fast later. And it feels like that's what we need to be doing more of right now.
Yeah. And, I should mention that in the slowing down, that's when leaders have an opportunity for their best thinking and the creativity to emerge about, well, what could we be doing well and effectively with AI? We need the time in the room with our contemporaries and our other leaders that we work with to be thoughtful and have some thoughts, because there's also a lot of blue sky opportunity. The AI does have the potential to dramatically transform how we do work. And some of that is very exciting, but we first need to think through it before we just dive into it.
None of us are logging into our MySpace account right now, are we? When that hurry to be first, you only have to do a quick history lesson to figure out the people that are first aren't usually even the winners in almost anything. So there is that tempering that you have to think about, like how quick should we go? Should we be aware? Of course. But where does it fit into our business strategy? Where does this fit with our people? What are we positioned for? What are we not positioned for? I mean, I have clients that like they don't not only do not have an ATS or HRIS system, they like still transitioning from paper. It's like their approach to AI might be a little different, like than an advanced technology company or a financial software company. So it's just, where are we and what are we trying to accomplish here? And how first do we need to be given the competitive landscape and the customers that we serve? And one other caveat in that too, when you're thinking about speed too, and back up to the leadership level that Heather was referencing, is if you want to make a bet that is almost always right, solving a customer's problem, solving an employee's problem is not why people are talking to you, although it's the premise. What people want to feel is heard and understood. Heard and understood. So if you're not doing that on the customer service front, within your employee ranks, within your leadership ranks, it doesn't matter what you do with AI. You're going to lose people. It's not going to work. You're going to lose customers. Well, we're all efficient and the chat works really, really great. The chat didn't hear me and see me and say, yeah, that's really hard. It might say that, but come on, I know that wasn't a real person on the other end. It's way different when you have that human connection.
That's so good. So leaders really need to be thinking through that lens of your value proposition too, of like, everyone can go fast with AI and do those things, but it's like how you connect with it. Is there a level of trust there that, hey, we've been through so much together. We've always been there for you and you can count on us that we're going to solve this for you and do right by you if mistakes happen. It's like that foundational level of trust is always going to be human, or it should be. I know I would not want to be negotiating contracts just strictly with an AI without another human on the end, when it comes to what you're doing in business, or even with just how I use it personally, being careful with the information you share. So that's a great point, BJ, about, the importance of the human trust element is so big.
It's interesting. And BJ, you may remember years ago as a company, we read a book called Trust and Betrayal in the Workplace. Because we were, trust building, as you said, Jason, it's a really important part of teamwork. But one of the biggest takeaways from that book is that there's three elements of trust: character trust, communication trust, and competence trust. And I've been thinking about that because I think when the book was written, it's about human beings building trust with each other. But as I use, the large language models that I go to for certain things, I've developed a high degree of competence trust with my little instance of ChatGPT. I mean, I've been using it long enough and it's doing some things for me. And I'm like, okay, this, I can trust this thing is going to do good work. I mean, I can't just, I have still to check it, all of that. But the thing that's, I think, harder to trust about AI is the character piece. That's the piece of I trust someone's values, their intentions, their motives. I understand what morality, moral code, or ethical framework that I'm interacting with. That's a little more obscure as you're interacting with AI. And that's why you've got to have human beings surrounding it to really ensure that whatever is designed in to these agents is pulling from a bank of business ethics, organizational values, etc., that feel right and good for who we are and what we do. Because a lot of organizations, they're not customizing, a private instance. You've got a lot of leaders out there using public models. You got a lot of leaders out there who don't even know that unless you tell it to challenge your perspective, it's generally going to tell you what it's learning you like to hear. Ugh, that's kind of scary because we don't have all the answers. AI, one of the best use cases of AI is that it can reach into the world's largest library and pull back perspective and information that you weren't able to get on your own.
That's really deep, and it touches on something around this concept of viewing AI. We're at that level now in terms of agentic capability, moving from generative to the agentic leap, where it's being used now, that it's an employee within the organization. About a year ago, Matt Burns at Atlas Copilot was the first one that brought this to my attention. He was talking about how in a lot of organizations, he's starting to see HR and IT merge and really an operating model of the two working together. And he said one of the first use cases is making sure if you go the agentic direction with the integration of AI in your business, you got to make sure that it's up with the mission, vision, and values, how it comports itself, how it collaborates with others, how it answers questions. It's got to be trained and onboarded in those ways, just like your human team members that you bring on. And that blew my mind a year ago when he mentioned that. And now it feels like here we are, to your point, Heather, that these are things that we need to start doing.
Absolutely. One of the things that we're working on is creating, a private leadership and culture studio for leaders who go through our programs. So it's a place, it's a system that leaders can interact with. It's got all the content, it reinforces everything they've learned in our programs. But we also have the opportunity to customize an agent with all of their cultural artifacts so that when they have a question about how do I give feedback to BJ, we've already trained it up that organizationally, these are our values, these are our leader capabilities, this is our history, these are our norms, this is so that rather than reaching into a public world's largest library, who knows what the influence is, let your leaders interact with a highly curated, safe instance of AI so that the advice they're getting back helps you propagate and scale your intentional culture. That's where you start to get this incredible cultural organizational impact only when you're taking that very customized, private, safe approach to how you design agents and even automations and workflows that may be happening.
Did you ever imagine that you would be doing these kinds of things before? Like when you started Advisa, when you came on to Advisa, to think we're going to be doing this type of stuff to help train leaders in terms of bringing on AI employees and what that means. Did you ever think that that was going to be in the game plan?
I didn't. I just work here. Heather's the boss. He hired me. No, I think that as all of these things come up, I've been working in this space for 16 years, doing all of this work and grew up here. At one point, I was the youngest, and now I'm the second most tenured to Heather, sitting right there as well. And it's the interesting thing when anybody talks about disruption, like our canvas that we paint on is human beings. So it's the one just variable that is for us. So whatever anything came, whether it was 2008 and this crisis and that crisis, you're still the same human being. We haven't changed really at all there going forward. So when it comes to like the arc of history and what's going to come next, you think this will affect you? And I'm like, are human beings going to be around? Yeah. Are they going to need to do stuff? Yeah. I feel pretty good. I feel like we're pretty well positioned to help people like survive, thrive, understand hard times, do meaning making, like enter curiosity, enter that zone of incompetence. Like one of my favorite quotes, it's on my bio on the website, is John Archibald Wheeler is a physicist. He says, as our islands of knowledge grow, so too do the shores of our ignorance. And it's the real leader that can they're looking at their cool island and I built that, look how great it is. Turn around to an infinite abyss of what you don't know. How much courage do you have to go step in there where you feel incompetent? You're a charlatan. I don't belong here. I don't know what's going to happen. There might be something dangerous in there. It could hurt me. That's leader work right there. Like Heather's doing that on behalf of our company. And I pray that most presidents and CEOs and partners and founders are being that courageous person, which means I am scared and I don't know, yet I still need to stare at this. I still need to look at this and move toward that. So in my 16 years, it's the same narrative when it comes to the human being, the human body, the chemicals moving inside of us. That's the variable that doesn't tend to move. That's been my perspective.
And I would say to leaders, you just heard those things from BJ, that should give you solace. I love that litmus test, BJ, of like, are humans going to be needed? Yes. Are we going to need to be doing things? Yes. So don't stress about so much about the things that are changing or feeling like you're falling behind. Like there is a future where this is going to work out. Is it a lot to deal with right now because of how fast it's happening? Yes. But that doesn't mean that you have to go faster and faster and make mistakes. Like you can still slow down and use wisdom and discernment, learn the readiness of your teams, and lean on the things you've already known and grown and developed over the years that are still going to apply in this situation, even though it feels like it's faster.
An exercise to think about as you sit in this and like press into this and feel it is start labeling your attachments. Like, what are you so afraid of losing? Really? Like, what's important to you? Like, what are you so, and once you start naming those things that you have the kung fu grip on about my work, about a relationship or work, about a project, it could be as little or as large, you start to see more clearly where the real attack vectors are. Where's the real threat to me? And when I take people through this exercise, it's much smaller than you think when it comes to what really actually matters to you and what makes you happy and thriving and where you see yourself at these different variables. I work in mentoring activities where I'm like, the best mentors, you when you're 80, when you're 40, and then you when you're 60. And like, what do you want that person to be saying about you? Not where you're at or how much money you have or anything, but like, what would make you proud of me now? If you're a leader trying to figure out who am I and who are we with this. And if you look at the attack, now all of a sudden you can name them for your business too. But if you haven't done the homework yourself, you haven't leaned in yourself, you're walking out pretty exposed because you're not going to be credible. You haven't come out there with vulnerability and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. And here's the parts I'm struggling with, because everybody is.
And to your point, that's one of those things you can't shortcut with AI. You can't be like, AI, tell me what my personal value should be. Like these are things you got to go through. It will. Yeah, that's right. But it's one of those, you don't want to take the poison apple. Like this is stuff you got to go through yourself and spend a lot of time and ask other people around you that have worked with you and experienced working with you to get those perspectives to really understand and be grounded of who you are as a leader. We want to remind everyone, this is a live stream special episode of the Culture Starts Here series with ADVISA with Heather Haas and BJ McKay on the CultureCon podcast. And as such, we've got a live audience with us, and that means we've got questions that are coming in. And so we want to take a look at some of those. So Heather and BJ, are you ready for some questions that are coming in from the audience?
Let's go.
I've gotten to ask a lot of my questions, so now let's let the audience hop in here too. So here's one of the questions. Are you seeing already high-performing leaders that BJ mentioned earlier using AI to allow more human connection, being more authentically present, and give more attention to their team members? Are you seeing those high performing leaders that you mentioned kind of to kick things off, BJ, using AI to allow more human connection, being more authentically present, and give more attention to their team members?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And it goes back to my intention. So if I've seen sales leaders that are otherwise great leaders that aren't really thinking about this the right way at all, they're really driving and leaning forward because what's their intention or their incentive? It's to create more revenue. And no one rolls over to the next quarter. We're going to expect less in this quarter. You guys worked hard last year. We're going to lower the quotas next year. Like, that's just not happening. So in those, they're incentivized for like speed. We got to move up. We got to keep up. And I've seen others. It's been on the other end of the spectrum where they're pulling back and they're trying to get more time with other people. But the quickest answer to that is when you look at the intention behind those leaders, like what are they intending to do? And their incentives, if we put it in a business context, what are they incentivized to do for their job? Like whoever's name's on the front of their paycheck, Heather's is on mine, for instance, like that's the stuff that I'm going to try to move forward within an organization. So I think those are my two best answers to that question, given just the wide range of clients that I work with.
That's really good. And if you had to redesign leadership development within this AI era, what are some of the things you're leaning into right now to try and equip leaders?
Oh, I'm so glad that question came up because that is the question that we're answering this year as strategically. It's how do we need to change the way leaders learn? In fact, our vision is to revolutionize the way leaders lead and cultures thrive. So, one of the things that we're doing is just naming the reality that content is a commodity. No longer is leadership development about what you're teaching them. Nobody needs to spend time in a room with other leaders in an in person or even virtual learning cohort to get content. You can go get it. Any content you want is at your fingertips. So it's really about learning transfer. How do we make sure that people are getting the brass tacks of how to give feedback, how to manage change, how to do a one-on-one, all the things leaders typically need to do? But how do we create more time in a cohort-based setting for practice and simulation? And most importantly, this is the frontier that we're stepping our toe into right now, using AI in the midst of that to do all of those things even better. Teach leaders how to use a large language model as a thought partner. Have the mindset that this is a teammate that I can tap and get perspective from before I design the way I'm going to approach Jason with this tough conversation. So there is a lot of creativity and thought that we're putting into exactly that question. I think the other thing we're doing to reimagine how leaders lead and how they learn in particular is actually giving them, like I said, a studio where they can practice what they learn. We've always given people when they go to learning programs a notebook. Here's your participant guide, and people get in their car after the workshop and they stick it on the passenger seat and it sits there until a month later they go back in to continue their learning journey and they're like, oh, yeah, they never open it. But what if there was a private instance of a studio where leaders could get real-time value out of going there because they're getting their perspective challenged? The studio and the agents within it know what their leader capabilities are. They know how they're wired. And so the advice that they get is fine-tuned and personalized. That's what we're trying to bring so that leaders have that kind of toolkit at their fingertips. And if their company isn't ready yet to organizationally create it, we got you. We're creating it. You can tap into ours until and if, maybe forever, but until and if your organization is at a place where they can start to create the clarity for you about what tools should you be using and what do we expect in the way of how you show up for your team.
That's
Can I
so
add
good.
just a caveat to that real quick, Jason, to what Heather shared? And if you're listening to what Heather says and you're like, that sounds great, like, how do we do it? I'd have you observe the growing chasm between knowing and being able to do. If anything, what AI did is it made it 1,000 times higher, that difference. And how are you addressing it? And they're like, well, how do I know it? Look at the results and look at your people. Like, you already are looking at the numbers. You're looking at what needs to be done to run your organization, and whatever you do, just watch. Watch what starts to happen when people have all the knowledge, like Heather shared, of every library in the world instantaneously. And now, obviously, then they'll just go do it, right? Yeah, like look at the fitness world, look at the diet world, like look at the finance world. There's no shortage of what to do. Here's what you do, just do it, right? You're good. Everyone's got six-pack abs now, right? Wrong. So when
No,
you look at
no.
your business, it's different people. Oh no, once we told them they understand it, great, prove it. Are you seeing that happen? That would be the zone where you're like, this might be something worth investigating. So
Yeah, we gotta help them, give them the opportunity to practice it in community with other leaders, learn from other people's wisdom as they're starting to integrate some of these new tools. And we've got to give them a safe, curated place to do that so that they're not out on their own using a million different things in a very public, not safe way.
So if I'm hearing you right, it's important to learn these things with other humans and in community together, not just in a vacuum on your own prompting with an LLM.
I think so. There's nothing wrong with doing your own learning, but there's also an element of how human beings grow and learn and evolve that is social. There's a social emotional part of learning, and the emotional intelligence and the fear and the joy and the connection that can be experienced when you put people together in a cohort, especially in person, is a very powerful accelerant to learning. You got to support each other. You got to give each other feedback. We're going to practice something new that feels foreign. And I'm a little fearful of it, but I'm starting to trust the people in this room. That's why a lot of our learning experiences are 6 to 9 month journeys where leaders are building relationships with the people in the room over time. And when we read the reviews of people who have gone through our programs, often what they say is some of the greatest value I was able to get were the relationships I built with the people in the room and the learning that I realized as a result.
I don't find that surprising at all. I'm just talking through my own lens. That's the stuff that has stuck with me over the years. Are those connections. And then you trust people to be like, I learned from them. They were right about this. I had a different perspective, but that turned out to be true. And they really helped me avoid making a big mistake here. And those relationships become so important with the trust. Well, I knew this would happen. Things are going by quickly. I mean, we're already 52 minutes into the live stream. We've got a few minutes left. And before we get ready to start wrapping up, we want to make sure we ask this question because it's a really important one that many times shows we may have blind spots, me in particular, in terms of what questions should I have asked. So I'm going to ask each of you this, Heather and BJ. What is something we should have covered today or I should have asked that I haven't so far? Anything come to mind for either of you?
I don't know what the exact question that you could have asked that would have led to what I'm about to say, but a thought that I still have on the topic is that it takes me back to when I was a teacher all those years ago, my early career. Those people who know me and work with me will laugh, but I used to be the tech coordinator for the middle school where I worked. And I was sent to a training that Intel was putting on for teachers. And I was nervous and I thought I was going to this tech training to learn all of these whiz bang technical skills, right? So I get there, I get into the computer lab, I sit down at the computer, I'm ready to go. And I'll never forget, it was like this guided thing. And the first slide that popped up, it said, questions are our most powerful technology. And I'm like, what? Okay. What I thought was going to be a tech training was actually a training teaching us that it doesn't matter what technologies kids are supposed to be using. The most important thing is that we know how to design questions that are going to lead us to answers that are relevant and important problems for us to solve. And I think that's still true today. Even though we're learning how to use a large language model and use agentic AI to do certain things, questions, human beings with their brains and our histories and our emotions, we still have to ask the right questions. They're going to take us to the places that we're meant to go. And a lot of what I think leadership development today, the revolutionizing of it is really about making sure leaders are able to identify what to ask and that they can continue to manifest their curiosity, to wonder, imagine what's possible. That's where the cool stuff starts to happen with AI. But we've got to have the curiosity and the questions to kick it off.
Asking the right questions, so important to start with. Even as the technology advances and you can go faster, slow down and ask really good, important questions. I love that, Heather. How about for you, BJ? Anything else that comes to mind for you as we get ready to wrap up today?
I think the question that maybe we could have asked or should ask and still can, that I'm going to go ahead and answer, and you can too.
I love that. Tee it up, set up and spike.
Is what question should we be asking? If I'm a leader, or I'm an employee or a frontline leader at a business listening to this, like, what should we be asking within our business to do anything with anything we talked about today? And the question that you should be asking is, what is uniquely human about what we do here? What is uniquely human about what we do here? I think that would be a extremely important inventory for any leader to take.
That is perfect. What is uniquely human that we do here? Leaders, don't sweat it. We're all muddling through this. Don't think that the things that you've learned and gone through over the years are obsolete. They are obsolete now. Couldn't be further from the truth. Double down on those. Those human skills are critically important for how you lead now and moving into the future. Fostering human connection, figuring out what's authentically human, asking the right questions that are discerned and distilled through your wisdom and experiences and those of your team. Those things will never be less important because AI is here. They're now more important than they ever have been. And Heather and BJ have helped us understand that today. Heather and BJ, any other final, kind of send-offs here, places that you'd like folks to go to learn more about the work that you're doing with leaders around this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I've alluded to it, but we're going to be rolling out a new workshop called Leading with AI, the Human Advantage. So if this conversation has been intriguing for you or caught your attention in any way, there'll be a link in the show notes for you to go check out what that workshop is about, because we're getting a ton of interest and demand already. It's not only going to be engaging with that leadership and culture studio that I mentioned, a safe place to practice the skills, but there'll also be a lot of collaboration, perspective sharing, and you'll come away with some new mindsets, some very practical hands-on skills, and hopefully some new friends.
Perfect. And for those who were joining us live today, if this is the first time that you've gotten to have the opportunity to learn from and hear from Heather and BJ, go back and listen to their other podcast episodes on the CultureCon podcast, the Culture Starts Here series, really important from ADVISA. And then make sure you go to that workshop. Go to advisa.com/AI and learn more. So Heather and BJ, thank you so much for letting me be on today and learn with you and share a lot of these important lessons for leaders as we're all figuring it out together as we go along.
Thanks, Jason. This has been fun.
Yep, same. Thank you so much, Jason.
That's a wrap on this episode of the official CultureCon podcast.
If you got something out of it, share it with a friend, a teammate, or a fellow culture geek.
And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode.
And if you want more ways to stay connected and inspired, check out our upcoming events page for a full listing of webinars, workshops, and conferences.
You'll find the link in the show notes, and we'd love to welcome you to a CultureCon event soon.
Until next time,